Prime Minister, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tom.
We talk about the pub test. You've been doing it this week.
Yes.
What are the everyday voters saying about this budget?
They welcome the fact that the government is leaning in to ensure that we can continue to see the economy recover. People understand that we haven't got here by accident and that we're living in a way in Australia like few countries are. They value their jobs, they value their health, and they want to see the things that we've been doing that have been working. They want to see us keep doing those, and they've seen that in the budget. While at the same time being very, very pleased that things like aged care and mental health, these have got a strong priority, and particularly women's safety as well, as we had a very strong reception to that. Very serious issue, and people feel it keenly.
No surpluses are forecast. There are none expected in the decade, but would you want one over the decade if you're still in power?
Well, the priority is growing the economy. You grow the economy, and that provides you with those opportunities down the track. But the focus is on growing the economy, and should that produce the sort of revenues down the track that would enable that to be achieved, and we always spend money carefully. That's how we got the budget back into balance before the pandemic, and so that again is our approach. But the key to restoring the budget is to ensure that we grow the economy, and you don't do that with higher taxes.
Previously, though, we did have some structural savings to get the economy back to that position. Is that the path forward again one day in the future?
Well, we made some important choices, but importantly what we did is we grew the economy. We got people down into work. 1.5 million people got back into work over the course of our being in government prior to the pandemic hitting. And what that is actually the key thing that drove the change in the budget. The budget was balanced largely by getting Australians off welfare and into work, from being a tax recipient from the taxpayer to being a taxpayer, and that was the key change.
But do you think one day the budget would need structural savings to once again get into that surplus? That's what most economists would say. The 3 to 4% structural deficit now needs addressing at one point.
No, what we need to do is grow the economy and get people into jobs, and that's what we're focused on.
So ultimately the budget repair task, have you turned your mind to how it would eventually happen?
That is the budget repair task, getting Australians into work.
So it's growth rather than savings one day?
This is how we achieved it before.
There were savings before though, weren't there? Structural savings.
We achieved the budget getting back into balance by focusing on growing the economy.
Okay. I wanted to ask about the COVID-flu comparison. We as a society, we do accept, perhaps albeit not consciously, hundreds of flu deaths a year, don't we?
We do, but COVID's not the flu. COVID's not the flu. COVID is killing thousands, hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and in many times thousands just a week. And COVID is going into a whole new phase now. We're seeing it ravage through the developing world, and the sheer mass of viruses is that when you take it into massive populations, as we're seeing it occur, the probability of variants to come from that means that COVID's getting worse, not better. And so it potentially is getting more deadly, not less. And so you've got to be careful.
So if you had a change of heart, because you said once we're vaccinated, we'll be able to treat COVID like the flu. Is that no longer the case?
I think what we've seen over the course of this year is we've seen the variants and we've seen the uncertainties only increase. Now, I think there are opportunities to change how we're managing it, sure, and we have been doing that. And you've got to prepare for a whole range of different contingencies down the track. But what I do know, particularly as we're seeing the virus ravage through the developing world, as it's gone through the developed world, that the risks of COVID, if it comes into Australia, you can't get it out. And at this stage of the virus and where it is globally, the uncertainties of where it is going are too great, and it's not safe to move to that next phase.
So, but your message now is because of these variants, you believe we can no longer think of COVID like the flu, even once we're vaccinated?
Well, I think we don't know where it will be in a year from now, Tom. And so that's why you can't let it in. You've got to be incredibly careful, and that's the medical advice we're following because of the uncertainties of where COVID is heading. And anyone who tells you they think they know where it's going to go, and if they want to take a punt with the nation's health, well, they might, I won't.
So that punt, though, when we talk about one day opening up, we'll never be able to open up risk-free, will we? There'll be some chance of death, even if it's the hundreds like flu, and hopefully no higher.
I think the key to our success as a country throughout COVID, Tom, is we haven't got too far ahead of ourselves. I totally understand why people might want to know what's happening a year from now, 2 years here, 3 years from now. if you're working right now, you just want to be sure that you're going to be able to stay in that job, and that Australia is not going to get ravaged by COVID, and that we're going to be able to keep living the way we are. I think Australians understand that the world has become very uncertain through COVID, and it's getting worse, not better. And the way we're living in a world where COVID is ravaging, and we can live like this in Australia, is something that they're very keen for us to preserve. And so I am also just as keen.
You've spoken this week about it's not just a target of vaccination, it's, for example, making sure vulnerable groups are vaccinated.
Yeah.
If they are vaccinated, the vulnerable groups, is an 80% threshold still around the ballpark for opening up international borders?
Well, we're not even seeing developed countries that are further ahead with the vaccination now achieving any better than the sort of the 60s. That's what's being achieved overseas. And so I think it's sort of very preliminary to make judgments about what level of protection that provides for a community. I don't think the numbers are in on that.
Do you want to see other countries live that before we decide what we do?
Well, what I'll do is make decisions based on the best possible advice and the clinical evidence that's available to us, and what's in the best interest of protecting lives and livelihoods. And what we're seeing here in Australia is we're living like a few other countries in the world. People are back in their jobs, businesses are investing, confidence is lifting, and we're able to live through this raging global pandemic. And what we have to be careful of is in Australia, as I've said many times, just because we can put 100,000 people in the G, that doesn't mean COVID's over. It is raging in the rest of the world. And so we have to be careful to ensure that we can maintain our strength and resilience towards COVID as we still sit in the middle of a terrible pandemic globally.
But you must be searching still for that number and asking for health advice. Is it 80%? Is it 85%? And
we're consulting with our medical experts all the time, Tom.
Will we get a number on that one day so we can sort of, as a country, you can drive people towards that?
At this stage, no number has been suggested to me. What has been suggested to me is all of the next steps that we need to prepare to take. But we can only take them when we think they're safe to take.
Final topic. If and when, well, I'm going to say when, I don't want to say if, when we open up again.
Sure, and I think that's a reasonable point. It won't happen overnight though, Tom, and this is the point. It's not shut one day, open the next.
Sure.
It's not binary. That's why, we're taking preparations. We're making preparations about what the potential next steps are, but there's still some time off.
But just on that, when we do, will states be able to opt in or out, or will it be up to them? Could they still be shut if you decide all borders are open, all travel's allowed? Could states carve off?
Well, we're not changing the Constitution, Tom.
But
there are no constitutional reforms.
But they've done that for the travel bubble.
States are still responsible for public health within their states. There's no changes to the Constitution, and states will always be doing that. They've been doing that for not just the last 18 months. They've been doing that, since before the Federation was established. So there are no changes to states' powers, and we'll continue to work together as a national cabinet. I think there is a good collegiate approach. That doesn't mean we agree all the time, and I know that does frustrate people, but they're sovereign states. They have their own powers and responsibilities, and they have to exercise them.
But they, for example, WA said, no, we don't want a part of the New Zealand travel bubble. That's international travel. They didn't want the planes land.
Well, they're exercising public state authorities.
Would they be able to do that if all
Tom, they can
were
exercise the powers they have under their Constitution and under the federal Constitution. That's not changing.
But does that mean if all borders are open, they could still do that?
Tom, I don't think there's any great help in speculating on hypotheticals in the middle of a pandemic. That's why I don't do it. And so what we'll do is keep working together.
But that'd be a power you can find out.
What we will do is make decisions as best as we can together in a consistent and harmonised way between the states and territories. That's also been one of the great successes of Australia over this course of this last 18 months. Now, it hasn't been without its disagreements, but there is not a federation in the world today that could point to the same level of cooperation and collegiality between its leaders as Australia.
It's a crisp day. We appreciate your time here in the cold in Tasmania. Prime Minister Scott Morrison, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Good to be with you.